I feel like all the talk exactly was the Eagles and how bad they were.
Yeah.
And it makes sense because, they went to the Super Bowl last year. They had this meteoric rise and then catastrophic fall. And like these just last like month and a half, they've been really bad. But the Buccaneers, and I've said this throughout the stream too, dude, like they look like they were shot out of a cannon, like firing the cannons. That first drive, Baker was slinging it. There was receivers dropping balls all over the place. He would have even done better. But yeah, the Bucs came to play, and that was evident, especially when you compare it to whatever the hell you saw with the Eagles. Because that was, dude, I was legitimately. Someone said like this is probably the most upset I've seen about it, like you about a team besides the Packers, because like the Eagles playing on Monday night was embarrassing, dude. Like the missed tackles, like even as a fan of the Packers and having to watch their defense for years, I was like, this is real bad.
The Buccaneers would have benefited, I think, in terms of like what people think of them as a competitive team in the playoffs if the Eagles played well and they won that game versus it looked like the Buccaneers were a better team, a more well-coached team, but the Eagles played so poorly, it's hard to gauge, right?
Yeah.
Almost like the same way, like that first half Packers-Cowboys game. Like we all think the Packers are a good football team.
Sure.
But they're not. The Packers are not a 27-0 every week type football team. And I'm not saying that like to knock the Packers. The whole weekend of playoffs was just like one-sided matchups. Like, are the Bills as good as they looked against the Steelers? The Chiefs dominated the Dolphins, but it was in a weird, frigid mismatch.
Correct.
Like the closest game was Lions-Rams, and you credit the Lions for walking out of that dogfight as winner. So I get it, but I think like you got to credit Baker Mayfield for playing well, taking advantage of the opportunities that were given. I gave Todd Bowles some love in winners and losers, and like for the Bucs to get back into the postseason after losing Tom Brady, bringing in Baker Mayfield on the cheap deal, they've got like their offense, like it's a little bit older of a team, right?
Sure.
You're the young team. You've got Mike Evans, and you look at that Eagles game, like Mike Evans drops a couple passes and like Buccaneers probably should have won by even more points.
Yeah.
But for the Eagles, they're in a disaster because their defense looks like shit. It got worse like every week. Why they had Matt Patricia there, nobody knows.
The offense
breaking down like how bad their game plan was for their defense. Someone else I think it was a former player, somebody talking about how that's what Patricia had the Lions lining up in, like the same like 3 coverage schemes, like every play while they were there. You've got questions around Sirianni, their offense has been ripped. Like I think Coleman was ripping them, like a month ago, saying they're running like a high school offense.
Yeah.
Shane Steichen goes to the Colts. They look better. So there's a lot of questions with the Eagles.
I think it's funny you bring up Sirianni, Raphael, because like this ties into that conversation. Because if you go back literally to the Super Bowl, right? Who was everybody blaming for that loss if you were a Phillies fan? Like if you were a Philadelphia fan, who were you
Gannon? Jonathan
Gannon?
Gannon?
Gannon, right? So even if you go back, and this is like on message boards, this is on subreddit, this was on social media, it was praising Sirianni. It was just like, even when this year, when they started struggling, when they beat Kansas City, and there was the whole like, see ya, like that whole thing, Philly was like, oh my God, I love this guy because like he's like our douche. Like he's our like, a-hole that's like kind of just because he is like Sirianni's like a cocky douche. And I mean that in like with respect. But I'm talking about, this is what we were talking about on Monday, when things are bad and when Brian Johnson is obviously not doing well, when they throw in Matt Patricia after Desai gets demoted and they're still not doing well, and then it becomes, oh, well, they're not doing well. And all those things that I found were like cute and funny before of like, oh, Nick Sirianni doing this and trolling and stuff like that. It's not as funny anymore because if he's still acting that way and they're losing games, ugh. But if they're winning and he's doing it, then it's great because then it's just kind of exemplifying like the Eagles and all that great stuff. Yeah. But I think his lack of decision-making when it comes to the coordinators and lack of change, because I again talk about this. The Buccaneers showed up on Monday night ready to play a football game. Both the offense and the defense, or the Eagles, did not. And it looked like that too. Like, it looked like they were giving up almost after the first quarter. So I think it's, again, losing highlights those issues even more. I said the same exact thing with Mike McDaniel and with Tua. You know, when they have those struggles in a losing effort and your season's over, those things that, okay, maybe were overlooked before now come into focus.
Yeah, and I think it's like one of those things too where Nick Sirianni, his background is on the offensive side of the ball, right? He was the OC in Indy from 2018 to 2020. But like, we don't think of Nick Sirianni as like this offensive-minded coach, right? Like, when you lose both of your coordinators, as a head coach, you better be really good on one side of the ball to kind of carry that cycle when you're losing dudes. Mm-hmm. And as bad as the Eagles defense was this year, losing Shane Steichen, I think, was huge.
That was like the biggest. Yeah.
He just Shane Steichen is an offensive guy, and we saw him make it work with the Colts, with Gardner Minshew. And if you're looking to the future, it's like, holy shit, what's Steichen going to do with Anthony Richardson next year? It's going to be awesome. So I think like the reaction is like, Eagles need to fire Nick Sirianni. Everybody wants him fired, but maybe like Sirianni is a good head coach. And the issue is just, you got to find two good coordinators, and the Eagles possibly just didn't do that this offseason. They didn't have a good plan for when those coordinators leave. And every year you're going to run into that problem. Like, if your offense or defense performs really well, your coordinators, like, look at Bobby Slowick right now with it's, and I like how, you know, the graphic for the Washington coaching staff, how it had McVay, Shanahan. All of a sudden, Bobby Slowick popped into that graphic out of nowhere. Nobody's talking about Bobby. And now 1 year as OC with the Texans was like, and Bobby Slowick was there.
I love how that team was just like the Avengers of future coaches. Yeah. And they just keep on adding it. And it was just like, oh no, I was there. Yeah, no, I was there. They just start photoshopping other coaches in there. Like, just, why not? Why not? Matt Patricia's just like, I was there too.
He's like, I was actually in the stadium watching the game.
I was in the background. You can see me right there. Yep, that guy right there. Yeah, I saw that. Can't do that. Can't throw popcorn. It was also funny too, because like that was like the epitome of like fandom, where it was like, screw you, Nick, you're gonna get fired. Throws popcorn on him. And then he's like yelling. And then he's confronted and he's like, hey, man, like, I'm good. And then tries to run away.
Nick, you're done, Nick. You're done, Nick. You're done. Hey, you better move fast.
And I'm just like, come on, man. Like,
yeah.
It's bad.